Hello, can you see me now? Can everyone see me? Wow, don't know what was going on there. Some strange technical difficulties tonight, but we're all here now. Everything's okay. I am never late for anything, you all should know. I hate being late. I think if you've just seen me if you've just now seen me, I am 1 minute late, and that drives me crazy. I am the kind of person that likes to be on time all the time. So can you all see me? Am I here? Are you watching my image? Give me some confirmation in the chat. If you can see me, that makes me happy. There were some technical difficulties. I had to switch my phone. I had to put it on to wireless. For some reason, it was not streaming, but you all can see me. That is great. Wow, okay. Thank goodness we were able to salvage it. I didn't have to set up a new link or something. My goodness, the Silicon Valley fascists must have it in for me, huh? I'm just kidding, of course. I'm sure it was just a technical problem. It had nothing to do with politics or anything like that. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Glad I'm here, folks, and glad you are here with me. Glad we are rolling. So, you haven't been around for a while, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Plenty to talk about tonight. Plenty to talk about. Glad you all are here. We all love doing this. Please post this around. Make it a bigger audience. The more people that are here, the more fun we will have. I will take your super chat questions as they come, so be sure to keep those rolling in. I have quite an opening presentation for you tonight, as you may have seen me advertising. I will be discussing the life of Michael Crichton, the author of the 1993 or the early 1990s book and then screenplay for Jurassic Park, and what we can learn from his life story about the divisions within the American ruling class. There's quite a bit there, actually. You'd be surprised. I did quite a bit of research into this, and I think there's quite a bit we can learn from that. So I'll be getting to that later in the live. Okay. China's 14th five-year plan. All right. And so we'll have our opening presentation, our opening remarks, like we often do. From there, we will do our roll call. And then from there, I will answer your super chat questions. And we will be good to go. Left unity, left sectarianism, and organize. Left unity, sectarianism, organize. What does it mean? So that's how we'll do it tonight. So be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Wow, it's a wonderful life. We can talk about that. Wonderful life. That's a great question. I can happily answer that one. So, folks, you should all be aware that we learned this morning at a press conference of the U.S. Department of Justice that the United States is harboring Chinese criminals. Yeah, that's what we learned. They announced, the U.S. Department of Justice, William Barr, they came out and they announced an indictment against 8 people. Now, these 8 people are charged for acting as agents of the Chinese government, among other crimes. And if you read the indictment, what it basically says is that someone who is not named in the indictment, they referred to as John Doe-1, that apparently someone named John Doe-1 is facing very serious criminal charges in China. And John Doe-1 lives in Brooklyn, New York, where I live. And 8 people, 7 who are Chinese, 1 who is an American investigator, private investigator with an Irish name like me, Michael Mageha, something like that. They're charged with essentially trying to convince the person, this fugitive from Chinese justice, trying to convince them to go back to their home country. Apparently they left notes and information trying to urge this person who is facing a criminal sentence in China to leave the United States and go back and stand trial in China. And for this, the U.S. government is indicting these people and charging 8 people, one of them a private investigator, the rest Chinese folks, charging them with essentially trying to induce this person who is a fugitive from China's justice system, trying to induce them to return to China on behalf of the Chinese government. That is what the indictment says. Now, you have to be very careful with indictments, because often when people are indicted and it actually gets to trial, the case against them at trial is completely different than what was in the indictment. And especially when they're making a big show of doing this, they're making it a big public thing. We are indicting this person, things can get very, very sensational. But I think that the real story here isn't that 8 people are being charged for harassing John Doe-1. I think the real story here is that John Doe-1 is somebody facing serious criminal charges in China, and the U.S. government is harboring them. Right? Now, we know in China there's been a huge crackdown on corruption that has been going on, right? The mass line campaign of President Xi Jinping. And it appears that this individual is fleeing China's legal system and probably has quite a bit of money. Now, we don't know who John Doe-1 is, but isn't it interesting? As the United States ridicules China, says it's corrupt, says it's a corrupt country, that it could very well be someone who is fleeing corruption charges that is being held. So I think that's an amusing, never had a chance to work argument about, Never had a Never had a chance to work socialism. All righty, good question. Another thing we should all be aware of: Philadelphia is in the state of rebellion right now after the killing of a young man. The police allege he had a knife, and after this killing, the people of Philadelphia are in the streets. Black Lives Matter is being chanted once again in yet another city. The ongoing rebellion against the rising low-wage police state and its effects on the African-American community is continuing now in Philadelphia, just a week away from the presidential elections. Other news, Keith Raniere, the Nxivm guy, the guy who started this strange Hollywood sex cult, Keith Raniere, to quote Dr. Phil, they're going to be pumping him sunshine. 120 years in prison. 120 years in prison, the Nxivm guy is facing. He's sentenced to 120 years in prison. They're going to be pumping him sunshine. He will be buried under the jail, so to speak, in figurative terms. And why is that? Why are they sentencing him to such harsh charges? I mean, he certainly has been found guilty of some pretty serious crimes, possession of child pornography, smuggling someone across the border in order to exploit their labor. He's certainly, fraud, etc. But why the 120-year sentence? Well, let me give you a word of advice. In the United States of America, you can get away with harming people. You can get away with harming people in the United States of America. But you cannot get away with harming the children or the relatives of the ultra-rich. And it seems that one of the families that was most brutally hit by Mr. Raniere and his sex cult was the owner of Seagram's. The Seagram's fortune. Do people know Seagram's? One of the major alcohol giants in the United States. The Seagram's fortune, right? A very, very wealthy family, the owners of Seagram's. It was a daughter of the Seagram's fortune that got caught up in Keith Raniere's sex cult, Nxivm. So, yes, if you're planning to harm someone in the United States and you don't want to get in huge trouble, do not harm the children of the ultra-rich. That is one way to be sure you will face serious consequences. If Mr. Raniere had simply been harming working-class people, he might have been charged for fraud, or he might have, been able to plea bargain his way out of it. But when he went after when he apparently, exploited in his cult members of the Seagram's fortune, children and heirs of the Seagram's fortune, That's what seems to have done him in my analysis. That is, you don't want to offend and earn the ire of the ultra-rich. Money is power in the United States, and Nxivm and Keith Raniere and Allison Mack and the strange branding Hollywood sex cult seems to have gotten on the wrong side of the Seagram's fortune. And not only them, apparently the daughter of a previous president of Mexico was also involved in his strange sex cult. So there you go. The Nxivm cult leader, Keith Raniere, shall not be seeing the light of day for a long time. Maybe if he's like on the brink of death when he's 80, they'll let him out for compassionate release or something. But he won't be getting out of prison for a long, long time. In other news, folks may have seen that the tech monopolists, the CEOs of Google, Twitter, and Facebook, were called before a U.S. Senate committee today in order to give testimony. Right? Democrats are calling this gathering, they're calling it basically a stunt by the Republicans. They're saying that it is simply about getting publicity for the Trump administration and their claim that they've been mistreated. Republicans say that by blocking the story from the New York Post, Twitter and Facebook were inappropriately meddling in the U.S. elections and trying to suppress news that was critical of Joe Biden. And so there was a hearing this morning on Capitol Hill before the U.S. Senate. A U.S. Senate hearing took place. And the classic moment of the hearing was that they called, obviously with the pandemic, it's not happening in person, it's happening remotely. Mark Zuckerberg didn't answer the phone for a long time. The whole hearing was put on hold while they waited for Mark Zuckerberg to pick up the phone. He wasn't answering. But of course, why would the great Caesar Augustus, why would he answer the phone for us lowly plebeians and patricians? No senators have the right to summon the great Caesar, right? For those of you who aren't aware of the reference, Mark Zuckerberg's hero is Caesar Augustus. Caesar Augustus, and he's very open about the fact that his hero is Caesar Augustus, the Roman emperor who came to power after the Roman Republic was crushed and who created Pax Romana. Pax Romana. The Roman Empire ruled the entire world, so there was no wars between nations because the Romans had absolute power. And it's not a secret that Mark Zuckerberg seems to think that Facebook can rule the whole world. Trotskyism. Trotskyism. Books. Right? He seems to have that kind of attitude. And I have often put Mark Zuckerberg in a category with what I call Silicon Valley fascists. And the fact that they were called before this committee, in fact, they didn't even voluntarily give testimony, even though they don't have to go there. They can do it remotely. They did it remotely. They didn't do it without the threat of subpoena. They were threatened with getting subpoenaed. And so in response to the threat of subpoena, the CEO of Twitter, the CEO of Google, and the CEO of Facebook gave testimony before a congressional committee this morning. And Republicans were making a lot of noise about an allegation of anti-conservative bias among the tech giants, that they're not being fair to right-wingers and conservatives. That is a long-standing theme. PragerU and others have maintained that there is a liberal bias among the tech giants, and that conservative voices are being suppressed. And that may be true. That doesn't mean the conservative voices are right, but there may be a somewhat liberal bias among Silicon Valley. But let's not forget that Silicon Valley is crawling with Ayn Rand objectivists and libertarians. Silicon Valley is crawling with Malthusians. And Silicon Valley is crawling with social engineers, people who feel that they are superior and think it is their duty to manage and rule over the rest of humanity, to treat us like cattle and sheep and herd us around, the inferior rabble who are not smart enough to become professional computer designers, right? There is very much an elitist attitude on Silicon Valley. And the complaint of a lot of the conservatives about Silicon Valley is that Silicon Valley elites don't feel any obligation to the country. They don't feel any loyalty to the society they grew up in. They consider themselves to have achieved everything simply by the sweat of their own brow. They have no loyalties of any kind, and that makes them more oriented toward the complaint of the economic nationalists and the Steve Bannons and the Donald Trumps of globalism, that Silicon Valley is not particularly loyal to the United States. Returning to feudalism. Facebook request. Friend request. And there was another question on there. Tibet, China. Tibet, China. So, that was what we saw this morning on Capitol Hill. And that is closely related to what I had the idea of giving you all a brief presentation tonight about. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, the big movie was Jurassic Park. In fact, I was too young to see it. I think I saw it on TV years later. But it was the big movie. It was selling box office records, directed by Steven Spielberg. Everyone thought Jurassic Park was the best movie ever. And the writer, the author of Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton, was a best-selling science fiction writer. Very, very well-known. Many other books that were popular, The Great Train Robbery, etc. And he wrote Jurassic Park. And, he raked in money from Jurassic Park for the rest of his life. He wrote many sequels to Jurassic Park. Michael Crichton, the novelist, the sci-fi novelist. And then you'll recall that in 2005, 3 years before he died, Michael Crichton got really political. 3 years before he died, Michael Crichton came out swinging as what people like to call a climate denier. He decided that global warming was a hoax, that it was not real. And he wrote a book called State of Fear about a conspiracy of left-wing scientists to convince people to believe in global warming. He gave speeches before the American Enterprise Institute that were shown on C-SPAN and elsewhere. Michael Crichton made it his effort in the last 3 years of his life to deny global warming. Why? Why did Michael Crichton spend the last 3 years of his life before he died of lymphoma? Why did Michael Crichton dedicate himself to the cause of climate denial? Why? What happened? What could possibly have happened? Now, of course, I don't even know anything about that. Now, of course, the standard answer that you're going to get from, critics of Michael Crichton and his climate, work and his denial of global warming, the standard response that you're going to get from those folks, they're going to say, well, he was paid off, right? He was paid off to do that. The big oil companies gave him some big award for writing that book. He was paid off. Paid off. Well, that's a bit of a simplistic answer because he was already a millionaire many times over, right? He wrote Jurassic Park. He was loaded, right? Best-selling books. He was not a poor man, and he came from money. You have to remember that too. He came from a very wealthy family, and we'll be talking about that later. He didn't have to do that. There was no big financial incentive. He wasn't going to go broke, and so he decided to do that. There's a reason that Michael Crichton spent the last 3 years of his life denying climate change before he died in 2008. And if you look at the life of Michael Crichton, you can understand the United States and you can understand the division in the ruling class right now. So let's break it down. Michael Crichton, he's a little bit older than a boomer, right? The baby boom started after the Second World War. He was born in 1942. The baby boom wasn't until 1945, so he was slightly older than a boomer. He went to Harvard University. And he studied at Harvard University, and he ended up getting a medical degree, right? He ended up getting a medical degree from Harvard Medical School. But he never practiced medicine because he wanted to be a writer instead. And actually, this is fascinating to me. This is an anecdote from when the young Michael Crichton was studying at Harvard University. I'm reading you. This is a passage from his autobiography. He says, "I had gone to college planning to become a writer." Reparations. Said, I had gone to college planning to become a writer, but early on, a scientific tendency appeared. In the English department at Harvard, my writing style was severely criticized, and I was receiving grades of C or C+ on my papers. At 18, I was vain about my writing and felt it was Harvard, not I, that was in error. So I decided to make an experiment. The next assignment was a paper on Gulliver's Travels, and I remembered an essay by George Orwell that might fit. With some hesitation, I retyped Orwell's essay and submitted it as my own. I hesitated because if I were caught for plagiarism, I would be expelled. But I was pretty sure that my instructor was not only wrong about writing styles, but poorly read as well. In any case, George Orwell got a B- at Harvard, which convinced me that the English department was too difficult for me. I decided to study anthropology instead, but I doubted my desire to continue as a graduate student in anthropology, so I began taking pre-med courses. So, that's kind of an amusing anecdote, right? To test the grading system of his English professors, he plagiarized the work of George Orwell to see if that would get him a better grade or not. It sounds like he didn't really have much to lose. You know, there aren't many people who can go to Harvard Medical School to begin with. Whitney Webb. Dark Winter. There aren't many people who can go to Harvard at all, or let alone go to Harvard Medical School. And there aren't many people who then would risk it all just to make a point about the grading system being unfair. I mean, he was risking getting kicked out of Harvard. And then on top of that, there aren't many people who go all the way to Harvard, get a Harvard medical degree, and then say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to be a writer. I don't, and he never practiced medicine. Can you believe this? A medical degree, a degree from Harvard Medical School, never practiced medicine. The guy grew up in Long Island, New York, very, very wealthy background. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, so to speak. He was from a very, very wealthy background. Another interesting aspect of Michael Crichton is that he used to joke that he was an expert in intellectual property law because he had sued so many people for plagiarizing his work. He felt that many, many people had plagiarized his work, and he won many, many lawsuits based on feeling people had plagiarized his work. He was very aggressive in defending his copyrights. Very, very interesting man. Now, he talks about the fact that he spent the 1970s going to gurus and psychics and trying to improve his karma so that he could have better friendships and better relationships. Furthermore, he was married 5 times, and 4 of his marriages ended in divorce. Now, why did Michael Crichton throw in against global warming so much? What is going on here? Well, now let's get to that particular piece of writing that is his most famous, the film Jurassic Park. Book Jurassic Park, he wrote the screenplay. So, for those of you who may not have seen the movie, I will quickly summarize. The movie tells the story of a guy named John Hammond. John Hammond is a scientist who starts cloning dinosaurs. He finds dinosaur DNA in mosquitoes that are frozen in amber, and he starts cloning dinosaurs, and he makes a theme park, with lots of dinosaurs in the park. And he's going to open it and The idea is people from all over the world will come to see these dinosaurs that he's managed to clone. However, he brings some scientists to the island to show them these dinosaurs that he's cloned. There's a tropical storm, the power goes out, and the dinosaurs all get loose and are running around the islands, eating people and terrorizing people. And then they discover that the dinosaurs are reproducing, right? The dinosaurs were all supposed to be female, so there could be no males, so they would not reproduce. However, because their DNA was mixed with the DNA of frogs, and some frogs change their sex as they evolve or whatnot. These dinosaurs have changed their sex and are now reproducing, and it's terrifying. And yes, that's what it's like. People compare it to Frankenstein's monster. People often read into it, "Don't play God," right? And to be fair, Michael Crichton did many times express opposition to genetic engineering. And he said that, yes, this was a warning against genetic engineering, which is very interesting. But I want to read you a quote from the movie Jurassic Park. "Life will not be contained. Life breaks free. It expands to new territories, crashes through barriers, painfully, maybe even dangerously." Let me read that one more time. "Life will not be contained. Life breaks free. It expands to new territories, crashes through barriers, painfully, maybe even dangerously." Right? And of course, what does the protagonist, the hero scientist, say when he's discovered the nest of dinosaur eggs? He says, "Life found a way." Life found a way. Right? Very interesting. Now, the friends and relatives of Michael Crichton referred to him as a workaholic. They said he was a workaholic. And, a very interesting figure. He says that the character of John Hammond, the scientist who creates the Jurassic Park, was inspired by Walt Disney. In fact, Michael Crichton says that the character of John Hammond was, quote, "the evil side of Walt Disney." And one of the major differences between the book and the movie is that in the book, the John Hammond character is kind of a sympathetic character, right? He has, he's created this park full of monsters, but, and he even dies trying to protect his grandchildren from being eaten by dinosaurs. In the book, he's completely different. In the book, John Hammond is a monster. I mean, he is a sociopath. He has no concern for other people. He's ruthless. They made him a kind of a lovable old grandpa who's a little confused in the movie, but in the book, he's a particularly nasty fellow. What's going on here? Well, in this message of life found a way, in this message of life will not be contained, life breaks free, it expands to new territories, crashes through barriers painfully, maybe even dangerously, what we are finding is an expression of what many people would call the American spirit. All right, Supreme Court. All right. The American spirit, right? Horace Greeley, who was the famous newspaper editor in New York City and member of Congress, kind of considered to be a key voice in the United States. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. All right. Sorry, someone in the other room is trying to get my attention. Horace Greeley very famously said, "Go west, young man. Go west, young man." Right? There's this go out and work hard and achieve your dreams. No one can hold you back, right? There's so much written about the United States as a nation of immigrants. Now, we know some people immigrated to the United States in chains as slaves from Africa. We also know that the peoples of the Southwest, the Chicano people and the indigenous people, they didn't immigrate here. They were always here. But regardless, so much is written about the United States as a nation of immigrants. As a nation of immigrants. of people that carved out a new way and a new land. This is so much part of the Americana, the American spirit, if you want to call it that. The notion that in America anyone can work hard and get ahead, right? That this is a country where people want to achieve their dreams, right? Oprah gives interviews where she says things to the effect of, in no other country is my story possible. I mean, as if people, in other countries don't go from rags to riches. Only in America could I become rich the way I did. Well, that's a little bit of an illusion, but it's very much part of the American identity. U.S. culture is very much obsessed with this idea of getting ahead, of working hard, of achieving your dreams, of becoming famous, right? Rags to riches. They talk about Horatio Alger. Horatio Alger was a novelist in the 1900s. He wrote these stories about poor people working hard to get ahead and rags to riches. Horatio Alger. There's also so much, for example, right? This is just a random example, but, one of the most popular Christmas carols is called We Three Kings, right? We Three Kings of Orient are, blah, blah, blah. You hear it at Christmas time. What's interesting is if you look at the history of that Christmas carol, We Three Kings, right? So the history of We Three Kings, the Christmas carol, you will have, wow, here I am, I'm back. So anyway, this song, We Three Kings, right, which is a popular Christmas carol, was written for the major Christmas pageant in New York City in 1857. In 1857, they were having a big Christmas pageant in New York City, so they went to a major hymn writer and they had him write We Three Kings. In 1857, this is, a time when the United States, they're still settling the West, right? And We Three Kings, the chorus of We Three Kings, it concludes with westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to the perfect light. Westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to the perfect light, which is very much about manifest destiny, right? Go west, young man, right? Horace Greeley was in New York City at that time as well, right? Go achieve your dreams. Go build something new. Go build new civilization. This is all so much part of the American mentality, right? For generation after generation, as the United States built itself up as a, quote, nation of immigrants, there was so much emphasis on this go west, young man, westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to that perfect light. The Mormons, right? The Mormon church, which is a big, you talk about you wouldn't have Utah without the Mormons, right? I mean, it's a big part of FBI and CIA, right? One of their hymns, it's called Come, Come Ye Saints, right? And, this is one of their hymns. It says, we'll find the place for which God, or we'll find the place which God for us prepared, far away in the west, where none shall come to hurt or make afraid. There the saints will be blessed. We'll make the air with music ring, shout praises to our God and King. Above the rest, these words will tell, all is well, all is well. And that this optimism that you find in the United States, this optimism, you can call it petty bourgeois aspirations. The United States seems to have very much been built on what you can call petty bourgeois aspirations, the dreams of the middle class. The middle class aspires to become the ruling class. The small capitalist aspires to become the big capitalist. The petit bourgeois aspires to become the grand bourgeois, right? This is so much of what the American spirit is about, and it's tied in with a huge amount of ugly, ugly settler colonialism and racism. Go west, young man meant killing Native Americans, plundering the Native Americans. It meant building the railroads and working people to death building the railroads. It meant Jim Crow segregation and slavery, right? And that this American desire to go and achieve your dreams in a new land, these American dream, all of this is very much tied in with a lot of really, really ugly settler colonialism, greed. You can talk about the railroad robber barons, the railroad robber barons that swindled their way to getting hold of the land. You can talk about the oil monopolies, the massacres that they call it, the Cleveland massacres, where the oil conglomerates set up their power. You can talk about the trusts and the monopolies. And the United States has generally been a country built on petty bourgeois aspirations, the desires of the lower level capitalists to become billionaires, to become the ruling elite. That is very much a part of the American spirit. Go west, young man, get rich, work hard, right? This is so much of what it means to be an American. And that seems to very, very much be what Michael Crichton seems to be all about, right? He's a workaholic. He gives up his medical degree, never practices medicine, and decides he wants to be a science fiction writer, right? You see in his writing, life finds a way, right? Life overcomes barriers. You see very much this American mentality, and that seems to be why it touched a nerve. And what's amusing about all of this is that these themes also seem to be a very big part of conservatism, right? Now, Michael Crichton, he says he first got the idea to write Jurassic Park when around the time he was having, his wife was pregnant with his first daughter. His daughter was being born. His daughter was born in 1989. And he was buying stuffed dinosaurs, for his child, his future to-be-born daughter. He bought stuffed dinosaurs, and he realized that children in particular have a fascination with dinosaurs. Kids love dinosaurs, and have. Years go by, and kids just love dinosaurs. Kids love dinosaurs because they're big and scary, because they leave behind bones that are like buried treasure. There's a lot of different theories about why it is children love dinosaurs. But regardless, children love dinosaurs. That inspires him to maybe write a novel about, about dinosaurs coming back to life or something like that. But I want to read you something, because Ronald Reagan, he ran for re-election in 1984, right? And Ronald Reagan, he had defeated Jimmy Carter. In 1980, they had the 1980 election, and Jimmy Carter was running for re-election. And the line that won the election for Ronald Reagan is, he said, "Are you any better off than you were 4 years ago? Are you any better off than you were 4 years ago?" That was the line. And that was a repudiation of Jimmy Carter for his pessimism, for his speech about, hey, if it's cold, rather than turning up the heat, you ought to wear a sweater, right? It was Jimmy Carter lecturing the American public at a time when they had an economic downturn and people were losing their jobs. Lecturing them and saying, hey, you shouldn't be concerned about owning things and wanting things, right? That malaise speech that he gave, which was considered to be one of the greatest political blunders in American history. Never has a president given a speech that was so poorly received as that speech that Jimmy Carter gave, called the malaise speech, where he lectured the American public about, not being materialistic at a time they were economically downtrodden and suffering. So the Reagan presidency was seen as very much kind of a repudiation of some of the pessimism that was coming out of the White House, right? Leftist politics around the time of Jimmy Carter became associated with pessimism. Jimmy Carter was a big promoter of the concept of overpopulation. There are too many people in the world. He sponsored a large number of studies about environmentalism and how there are limits to growth, right? The Club of Rome and their theory of the limits to growth, the idea that growth needs to slow down. We need slow growth, and that Jimmy Carter's presidency, in a lot of ways, almost everyone in his administration had come out of something called the Trilateral Commission, which was a think tank set up by the Rockefellers. And the Trilateral Commission was talking about overpopulation and the need to control the people and the danger of democracy, right? Democracy was dangerous to capitalism and how there was a need to restrict it. Noam Chomsky called out the Trilateral Commission for its blatant anti-democratic tendencies. And the Carter presidency was very much a Rockefeller, Eastern establishment, synthetic left presidency. It was all about the idea that the masses, the rabble, they have it too good, they're spending too much, they're reproducing too much. We need to control them, we need to restrict them, and we need to slow down the growth because they're using resources up too quickly. Well, Reagan, his rise as a political figure was about repudiating that and appealing to these sentiments that I'm describing. This go west, young man, achieve something, achieve your dreams, work hard, life will not be contained, life breaks free, it expands to new territories, crashes through barriers painfully, even dangerously. This is all very much, these are Reagan themes, right? In 1984, Ronald Reagan is running for president for re-election. And he runs a very, very famous advertisement. And this is how the ad goes. It's morning again in America. Today, more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history. With interest rates at half the record highs of 1980, nearly 2,000 families today will buy new homes, more than at any time in the past 4 years. This afternoon, 6,500 young men and women will be married, and with inflation at less than half of what it was just 4 years ago, they can look forward to confidence in the future. Confidence in the future. It's morning again in America, and under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is prouder and stronger and better. Why would we ever want to return to where we were less than 4 years ago? Doesn't matter where you go to college. Matter. You go to college. All right. This is the divide, really, between the liberals among the bourgeoisie, the ultra-rich, and the majority of the ruling class, the rich, right? Do you aspire to build more and grow more and have more? Or do you want to slow things down so that you can stay at the top? The ultra-rich, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the DuPonts, they are already at the top. So they want to slow things down. They don't want any competitors. They want to manage things. They want to socially engineer and control so that they can stay and ensure that they stay at the top of the pyramid. Meanwhile, the majority of the ruling class resents that and feels like they're being contained and held back. They don't want to be controlled. They want to maximize their profits. Left or right. They want to maximize their own profits. This is the divide that has defined American politics for the past 100 years. The fight between the rich and the ultra-rich, the entrepreneurial bourgeoisie or the managerial bourgeoisie. This is the divide between the pessimistic outlook, racism, and environmentalism. Between the pessimistic outlook of the ultra-rich, who want to control humanity, fear humanity as a dangerous horde that could potentially get out of control, want to slow down growth and hold everything back so that they can stay at the top of the pyramid, and the optimistic view of the majority of the American bourgeoisie that want to get rich or die trying, get more money, work hard, work relentlessly, get to the top. This is the divide. I said before, the United States is built on petty bourgeois aspirations. Well, Michael Crichton very much represented the sentiments of the lower levels of American capital. His whole life tells that story. Best way. His whole life tells that story. He was all about working hard, all about getting ahead, all about life finds a way, it overcomes barriers, the relentlessness of the human spirit, the idea we're just going to fight to get ahead. That's what Michael Crichton was all about. And so, of course, the pessimism that dominates a lot of those raising the climate alarm was a big threat to him. Because let's face it, the majority of voices, what were you like? The majority of voices promoting climate change have a pessimistic worldview. They say human beings have gone too far, we're using too many resources, we're reproducing, growth is bad. Economic growth is bad. We need to stop growing. We need to stop moving ahead as a species. We need to slow down. It is a pessimistic worldview. That, there's actually a book published by the Club of Rome, The Limits to Growth. Right? Some of these documentaries that have come out recently about climate change actually attack the concept of growth. They go as far as saying growth is bad. This is a pessimistic worldview. Very, very pessimistic and dark worldview. Humanity has gone too far. We're incapable of achieving anything more. We've got to stop. Right? That is the worldview of the ultra-rich, and that is their response to climate change. As climate change proves that humanity must stop. We can't keep going. We can't keep achieving things. We can't keep moving ahead. We can't expand the life expectancy. We can't have new inventions, right? We can't move ahead. We've got to go backward. That is the worldview of the ultra-rich. And it is their think tanks and their foundations and their institutions and their intelligence agencies that have come to dominate what is called left-wing politics. That is inherently opposite of Marxism. Marxism says there is no limit to growth. Marxism says that with the banks, factories, and industries organized rationally and no longer controlled for profit, there is no limit to human creativity and growth. That we can continue to grow and grow and grow. That's what Marxism says. Private armies. Marxism says that not only can we have it better than we have it today, but with rational control of the means of production, by eliminating the anarchy of profits in command, that humanity can grow and grow and grow, and that so much abundance can be created, so much prosperity can be created, so much peace can be created, so much comfort can exist, that eventually the need for any coercion at all can go away. The state, as an institution, will wither away. That is the vision of Marxism, is that with rational planning of the economy, without the greed of the capitalist in command, without the capitalist exploiting the worker, but with all of society owning and controlling the wealth together, with the major centers of economic power, the banks, the big factories, the big box stores, the airlines, the means of communication, the means of transportation, with the major centers of economic power, the oil wells and the coal mines, with all these things being consciously, rationally planned and owned by all of society and organized to work in the interests of all of society, growth will be unlimited, and that humanity can get to astounding heights, and that all of us can be far, far wealthier and far, far more comfortable than the richest billionaire in our time. Marxism is an optimistic ideology. It is an ideology that says human creativity and human brilliance is unrestrained. Read Frederick Engels and his writings about the role of labor in the transition from ape to man. He talks about how other species only interact with their environment, but humanity, mankind, is different because mankind has the ability to force the environment to serve him. Right? Beavers, they've been making their beaver dams the same for thousands of years. Ants, you look at their ant farms, they look about the same for thousands of years. But human beings have gone from hunter-gatherers in caves to Mesopotamia and Greece and Rome to medieval Europe to the Industrial Revolution, all the way up to space travel and iPhones and YouTube. Human beings are creative creatures that are capable of achieving real, astounding miracles. And human beings are creatures that long to grow and expand. The nature of humanity is growth. The nature of humanity, if there is such a thing as human nature, is growth. Human beings aspire to grow and expand and build a better world. That is the nature of mankind. That is the history of mankind. That is what makes human beings unique. That's what separates human beings from all other species. No other species is like this. Human beings are unique. That is Marxism. Marxism is an optimistic ideology. It's thoroughly optimistic. Says we can get beyond the horrors of capitalism, organize society, and have more abundance than ever. It is a pro-growth ideology. But the synthetic left, the left crafted very carefully by the Congress for Cultural Freedom, glad you like it, Dylan, by the think tanks of the Rockefellers, the pessimistic left, the destructive left, has a very, very different outlook. And so, in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan crushed Jimmy Carter, crushed him by associating him with that viewpoint, with that pessimism, with that darkness. What's interesting, though, is if you read the writings of one of my favorite writers, Anna Louise Strong. Check out Anna Louise Strong, amazing, amazing American journalist from Seattle. She was a leader of the IWW Union, the Industrial Workers of the World, the Wobblies. She led the Seattle General Strike of 1919. And after the Russian Revolution, she was one of the first American journalists to go and visit the Soviet Union. And she eventually moved to the Soviet Union during the 1930s. And she wrote a book, an autobiography called I Change Worlds. And it's called I Change Worlds, the Remaking of an America. And she describes this American mentality that I've been talking on here, this belief that growth is good. Life cannot be restrained. It's never held back by anything. It achieves growth. It accomplishes things. And she says that she found the American mentality in the Soviet Union. She says that while in the 1930s, while Americans were in bread lines, in Hoovervilles, starving, hungry, in the Soviet Union, it was build, build, build. She said the American mentality, what she calls the motor-mindedness of the American spirit, that pioneer, go work hard and build things spirit that Anna Louise Strong identified with America. She says that during the Great Depression, Patton. She says that during the Great Depression, that American spirit had been lost. The United States was no longer a country that they felt that the state didn't care about them. They felt that the government didn't care about them, that they were on their own. They were hopeless and frustrated during the 1930s. But it was the Soviet Union that was the new America. The Soviet Union was where that optimism was found. where people believed that tomorrow could be better than today. And the smartest engineers and scientists and writers were all going to the Soviet Union and marveling about it. And that the Soviet Union, with its 5-year economic plans, with its big construction projects, with its campaigns to wipe out illiteracy, building new schools and hospitals all over the country, what Stalin was doing in the Soviet Union, the economic achievements of the 1930s, where one of the poorest countries in the world, Russia at the time, one of the poorest countries in the world, became a superpower and industrialized itself with the biggest hydroelectrical power plants in the world, with huge achievements. The best music was coming out from Shostakovich, the best ballet performers in the world, the best films with Sergei Eisenstein. Everything that the Soviet Union was achieving in the 1930s, people in the 1930s, they said that the Soviet Union is the new America. Right? That was what she writes about. She writes this. Read Anna Louise Strong's writings on this. She says that American mindset, that go get 'em, that achieve your dreams mindset, was in the Soviet Union. That's what Anna Louise Louise Strong writes about. That capitalism was an outdated system, but that the go get 'em, motor mindedness, growth mentality was being found in the Soviet Union. And where is the go get 'em, go out and achieve your dreams mentality found today? In China. Absolutely. China is building high-speed railway all across the planet. It's raising impoverished countries around the world up, building electricity there, power plants. China very much has that same idea. You could say now that China is the new America, because it's China that is talking about the Chinese dream, that is talking about the mass line, socialism with Chinese characteristics, one belt, one road initiative, the shared community and vision of all mankind. All of this stuff that people used to associate with America, that work hard vision, that belief that we're going to build a better country, tomorrow's going to be better than today, people now associate it with China. They associate it with China. And Michael Crichton, as he's battling against the Eastern establishment, I saw that question before, as he's battling against the Eastern establishment, and he's denying climate change, he seems to represent, in a lot of ways, the problem, the enigma, the riddle of American politics. Because when it gets down to it, if you are somebody who believes in Marxism, both sides of American politics are very, very, very problematic. Right? I mean, let's start with the right wing, where Michael Crichton is. Climate change is real, folks. Michael Crichton might have worked really, really hard to convince people otherwise. He probably believed it was a hoax. Climate change is not a hoax. Climate change is real. It is a real problem. There is no point in denying climate change. Climate change is a reality. It is affected by human behavior and pollution. You cannot deny climate change, okay? And the right wing, by denying climate change, is being absurd, being anti-scientific, being ridiculous. The right wing in the United States also wraps up their pride in the American way of life by denying racism. Right? That's what's going on. Trump is getting rid of anti-racist trainings at government jobs. Right? Trump is ranting against Howard Zinn. Tibet. Ranting against Howard Zinn. He makes people hate their country. And that this American spirit that you find on the right, this optimism on the right, involves denying racism, denying the history of the United States and the ugly history. Plus, it involves ruthless, rugged individualism. Right? We can't work hard as a country together to achieve it. Oh, no. It's every man for himself. Compassion is weakness. Kindness and human solidarity is for fools, right? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That is the American right wing. right? If someone's unemployed, it's their own fault. They ought to go get a job, right? If someone's hungry on the street, oh, they're just lazy. Don't help people, right? The right wing in the United States has wrapped up their optimism and their desire to work hard and achieve things. They've wrapped it up with ruthless, rugged individualism, with chauvinism, national chauvinism, bigotry, anti-communism, climate denial, right? Their optimism is simply an expression of the will of the lower levels of capital to make profits and a hostility toward anything that might get in the way of the ultra-rich and their desire to make profits. To be conservative in the United States in our time means that you are a worshiper of capitalism. That's all it means. It means you are a worshiper of capitalism. That's all it means to be a conservative in the United States anymore. Social conservatism, they might be more religious, or they might be, but at the end of the day, all that it means to be right-wing in the United States means that you worship capitalism. So that's the right wing. If you're a Marxist in the United States, you certainly can't be on the right wing, right? We believe in solidarity and brotherhood. We believe that profits should not be in command. We believe in people before profits. We don't deny global warming, right? We're not supporting the right of employers to ruthlessly exploit people. We're not in favor of deregulation. Meanwhile, there's the American left wing. And as Marxism has faded away, the so-called left wing of American politics has been infected with pessimism. Growth is bad. There is no future. Human beings are like animals. There's too many of us. We're breeding too much. We need to go back to nature. We need to go back to nature, right? There's this pessimistic view. There's this hopelessness. This belief that there is no future. The planet is just getting worse. This dark view and this contempt for humankind. Populism is the greatest evil, according to the American liberal, because populism means that the rabble are getting together. The inferior, uneducated masses are coming together and organizing for their rights and demanding things and protesting. Right? We can't have that. Right? They're not smart enough to do that. No, we need smart intellectuals to manage them and control them. Give them phones to dazzle them all the time. Right? Give them drugs to take and control their minds, right? Just let the broad masses of people, this vulgar mob that threatens the intellectual, let them be carefully controlled. Let them gradually die off. Manage them, control them, educate them so that they're not racist, sexist, homophobic, and uneducated. That is the liberal view. And if you're a Marxist, you can't have that liberal view either. No, look, folks, it's not a surprise that Pete Buttigieg equated Bernie Sanders with Donald Trump. And he's not the first one to do that. In a lot of liberal circles, they see Bernie Sanders as just as dangerous as Donald Trump. Why? Why? Because they're both trying to build a mass movement. They're both stirring up working people, and that is inherently dangerous. The masses are dangerous when they're in motion, right? This is liberal ideology, and it's very, very dangerous. If you're a Marxist in the United States, you can't be on the liberal left either. because the liberal left does not share your optimism. It does not share your love of the people. It doesn't seek to empower the people. It sees the people as a dangerous mob that must be controlled. So what do you do as an American Marxist? What do you do? What do you do? Right? You can't be Michael Crichton. You can't deny global warming. But at the same time, you can't be on the right. I mean, the right is awful. It's everything you're against. What do you do? The answer is you get to the masses. You get to the masses. And you get to the masses with two things. The first thing, which is American rebirth. The United States was founded on racism, founded on slavery, founded on the slaughter of the indigenous people. And if we are going to get ahead as a country, we need to be reborn. I've said many times before, and I will say it again, that if something is conceived in an impure way, it is corrupted. If the way something is established is impure, the product is impure. In legal terms, they talk about fruit of a poison tree. And yes, at one point in the United States, there were a lot of people who had houses and cars and lived a very prosperous life. We know about the American dream, the so-called American dream, the 1950s. But we know that back in the 1950s, when there was a booming economy, when people had houses and cars in the suburbs, those houses and those cars were dripping with blood. It was the blood of the indigenous people, the blood of the black people who were living under Jim Crow segregation. It was the blood of the people of Vietnam, the blood of the people of Korea, the blood of the people of Latin America. That the once prosperous times for the United States were built on a pile of corpses. Right? And this is what all these people that want to give a body count about communism don't seem to understand. Right? You couldn't have had capitalism without colonialism. You couldn't have had capitalism without the transatlantic slave trade. You couldn't have had capitalism without the slaughter of the indigenous people. You couldn't have had capitalism without sweatshops working children to death. Right? You couldn't have had capitalism without the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. You couldn't have had capitalism without the many, many people who died laying the railroads. That capitalism, from its inception, has been a genocidal system. That just to create capitalism required something called the primitive accumulation, in which the peasants were kicked off their land, in which they began executing people for the crime of being homeless, for vagrancy or vagabondage. Read about primitive accumulation. It's one of the most interesting sections of Karl Marx's Capital, where he goes into great detail describing how capitalism began as a system with mass genocide, the clearing of the Scottish Highlands, the clearing of the commons, that the primitive accumulation that established capitalism, when the capitalists seized power from the feudal aristocracy, when they created private property and cleared the feudal estates and commons, when they transformed the peasantry into wage workers, millions of people died, and millions of people have kept dying. They have died in their ugly wars. You can talk about World War I, where 20 million people, 20 million workers were sent to their deaths so that the capitalists and imperialists could carve up the world among themselves. Look at how many people lost their lives when the capitalists were determined to keep their grip on Vietnam. And they're determined to keep their grip on Korea. When they were determined to keep their grip on Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya. The body count of capitalism is astoundingly high. It's incalculable. Talk about the millions killed in Africa. You can talk about the millions killed in Latin America. You can talk about the crimes committed against the Chinese people before they won control of their country, right? The United States was established in the process of primitive accumulation, in the process of capitalists seizing control of the world for themselves and crushing all kinds of lives all over the world. And because of that, if the United States is going to get better, it's going to require a political, economic, and spiritual refoundation. And this is my concept of the American rebirth, that the USA must be reconceived. A spirit of brotherhood and kindness and compassion and shared destiny. That's one thing that absolutely must be made clear. The other thing that needs to be made clear is that if you really want that human spirit of growth to return, if you really want that optimism that keeps people going to return, if you want that motor-mindedness, that American mentality, that work hard and get ahead, that achieve your dreams, that entrepreneurial mentality, if you want to get that, socialism is the way. It's socialism that turned both Russia and China into superpowers. It's socialism that made Cuba, a small island in the Caribbean, known all over the world for its healthcare system. It's socialism that raised millions from poverty and continues to do so around the world. And that socialism, if it's going to be successful, it's going to capture the imagination of the American people, it can't be a socialism built on, fuck this shit, give me free stuff. Not that I fully disagree. I don't fully disagree, right? That is the mindset you find among a lot of Bernie-crats. They say, fuck this shit, give me free stuff. And they're not wrong. Corporations get free stuff all the time. Banks get free stuff all the time. Billionaires get free stuff all the time. So why shouldn't you get some free stuff? Right? The system is rigged, so fuck this shit, right? The system is rigged, fuck it. But fuck this shit, give me free stuff is not a mentality that is going to save America. It's not a mentality that is going to inspire people to build something. It's not appealing to the best in people. The fuck this shit, give me free stuff attitude will not bring socialism to the United States. The way for socialism to come to the United States is it needs to be a socialism that captures the motor-mindedness and the creativity and the drive within people. Socialism is not about crushing people's creativity. Socialism is about unleashing people's creativity and lifting it from the restraints of the profit system. Socialism is about now allowing human brilliance to go further than ever before. Socialism is about getting beyond the chaos of the market, the system where people are homeless because there are too many houses, where people are hungry because there's too much food. Socialism is about allowing us to come together as a species and rebuild not just one country, but the whole planet in a rational way. Socialism is about humans asserting themselves and fighting for their future. Socialism is not about greed. Socialism is not about individuals crushing each other. Socialism is about humanity coming together to work for building something better for all of us. It's about applying human reason to the economy. with rational central planning. But socialism is also not pessimistic. It's not dark. Socialism is the human species asserting itself and asserting that no, we're not going to go extinct. No, we're not going to stop growing. Socialism is an ideology that understands that life will not be contained. Life breaks free. It expands to new territories, crashes through barriers painfully, and maybe even dangerously. And on that note, that is the conclusion of my opening remarks. I thank you for listening. And we've got plenty of super chats to get through. But why don't we do our roll call? Why don't we do our roll call, folks? Names and locations, I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. JT24 in Mississippi, right? St. Augustine, Florida. Woodstock, New York. Owen in Connecticut. George County, New York. Dallas, Texas. Jenny from Cincinnati, Ohio. Bill from the United States. Max the Saxon, Virginia. Pennsylvania, USA. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Stanley Stanlin in New York. France in Paris. Rocky from Reno, Nevada. British Columbia, Canada. Greetings from the South. Springfield, Missouri. Kendall from San Diego. Seattle, Washington. Columbia, South Carolina. Georgia, USA. Manchester, New Hampshire. Giles in Cincinnati. Buffalo, New York. Marissa, thanks for the inspiring message. You got it. Austin, Texas. Long Island City, Queens. Lloyd Bennett. Stuart Edwards in Orlando, Florida. Mo in Toronto. Brian in Illinois. White Plains, New York. Vallejo, California. Iowa. Charlotte in Nassau County, New York. Andre in Virginia. Worcester, Massachusetts. Dan from Iran. Quincy, Massachusetts. Don from Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Occupied Ireland. Rio de Janeiro, Toronto. Frankfurt, Germany. Wilmington, California. Hello, Mr. Caleb. St. David's, Bermuda. Salt Lake City. Chemtrails. Detroit. Lafayette, Louisiana. Mohsen from Iran. Liverpool, UK. Matthew in Sydney in Australia. God's country. Who else is with us? Marxist Cat Girl thanks me for the introduction. I'm glad I lifted your mood. Mars. Someone's watching from Mars. Ooh, well, there you go. They call it the red planet for no reason, huh? It's the red planet. All right, Miles from Vancouver, Canada. Leipzig, East Germany. Worcester, Massachusetts. Eugene, Oregon. Love your show. Hello from Northern Michigan, says A. Clark. Glad you like the show, A. Glad you like it. Austin from Massachusetts. South Florida, Harold Sullivan. Right? Liked my opening in California. Glad you liked the show. Glad you like it. I'm here to please. I mean to please. In a second, I might have to get up and get some water. I didn't bring water like I normally do, and my throat is killing me. Sam Levin in Los Angeles. Right? Shaniqua from Buffalo. Maine, the third ring of Florida, South Korea. Hydrate. Very good. Great intro, says Harold Sullivan. Glad you liked it. Glad you liked it. I've been mulling around Jurassic Park in my head for a few days, trying to figure out what we could get from it. All right. Northern California, Humboldt, California. Dante from SoCal. Very good. Northeast. Very good. Very, very good. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Hamilton, Canada. Chicago. Don't ever come to Florida. Okay. I've been there before. Sydney, Australia. Very good. Very, 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 very good. Okay, folks, I do apologize, but you are going to have to sit here and look at this beautiful painting that sometimes goes black while I go and get myself some water. I'm going to make sure that I have water so that I don't lose my voice while I'm with you. So hold up. We're going to have a really quick intermission while I go and get the water, and you can look at this painting, and I will be right back. I promise. Very embarrassing. Glad I got through my opening, but I need some water before we answer the super chats. 1 second. Are you still with me, folks? Are you still with me? I hope you're still with me. I'm glad you are, because I'm still here with you. All right, wasn't too long now, was it? All righty. All right, so we have a few super chats to get through, and I'll be taking more. I'm always happy to answer super chats. So, folks, if you're just joining us, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. And please, 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 I am begging you, please tweet this out, post it on Reddit, invite all your friends, bring people along, make this a Facebook status. Oh my God, did you hear what Caleb just said? Caleb's live right now. Let's make this a bigger conversation. The more people here, the better off we are. More people, the better. So glad we're all here. I'm not gonna, I don't want to go there, Nick. All righty. How do you think policing and criminality will work in a socialist society? Okay, that's a good question. Policing in a socialist society. Very good question. All right. Great. Okay, so let's start talking about these super chats. If you have more questions, don't worry, I will write them down and we'll keep going. All right, what do I think of China's 14th five-year plan? Well, I haven't read it. It's probably a pretty long plan, but I imagine that they have a lot that they need to do, right? Because the pandemic obviously slowed China down. Their record of growth was slowed down because of the pandemic. And so because of that, they probably need to adjust. I would be curious to get the details on what is in the 14th five-year plan. I do remember one of the sweetest things, the 13th five-year plan, they made a song about it. And check it out. It is the cutest thing. They made like a cartoon and song for children. Go to YouTube, type in five-year plan song. It is the sweetest thing, and it is very optimistic. It expresses exactly what I was getting to tonight with my opening remarks, right? The American mentality, the motor-mindedness, the achieve your dreams mentality is in China right now. Socialism is the only way to get that back, folks. Pessimism is going to control capitalism. Go and listen to the five-year plan song from China. It is adorable. If you want to know what China's going to do, I don't want to butcher the Chinese. I'm not going to say the second part. It's very sweet. All righty. All right. Left unity versus sectarianism. Well, I'm critical of both. I'm critical of both left unity and sectarianism because left unity, right? While, on the one hand, you want to get along with as many people as possible. You don't want to make enemies. But the left, the Marxist movement in the United States is pretty irrelevant. It's pretty irrelevant. DSA is pretty big, but then again, that it's not a Marxist group. It's more of a social democratic, big tent that anyone can join. DSA, suddenly has a lot of money and resources. But aside from DSA, the Communist Party is very small, and the other groups are even smaller. And left unity. If all the people in all the ML groups merged into one, they would still be completely irrelevant. Okay, and in order for all of them to merge into one, you would have to accommodate all the reasons that they have remained irrelevant, right? All these left groups, they have they've been irrelevant for a reason. If you're going to merge them into one, that would require a huge amount of compromising because you'd have to keep everyone happy and get them all, to unify. And that would mean accommodating all of their backwardness. I'm sorry, but I've sat in rooms, I was in a political group and we weren't allowed to say America because that was chauvinist. We had to say United States. And then people screaming at each other over whatever the latest fight is about, I don't even want to get into it. Look at left Twitter and stuff, okay? Imagine what you would have to do to get all of those people in the same room. Those people are screaming at each other all day. We don't need unity of leftists. We need leftism to be unified with the masses. We need a type of socialism that can actually capture the imagination of millions of American people. We need to get to the masses. We need to unify socialism with the broad masses of people. We need to develop a socialism with American characteristics. We don't need to get all of the irrelevant, isolated, angry socialists all in the same group. So there's that. In terms of sectarianism, though, I mean, sectarianism is pretty. I mean, sometimes you look at these groups and you almost wonder if, like, if they have to, in order to prove they're the one true party, they have to take a position that's so crazy no other group will take it. That's a really common thing on the left. Is almost every communist group thinks it's the one true party, and everyone else is a phony. And I mean, that's unfortunate as well. And there are some groups that are really sectarian, and really nasty to other groups, and like reserve permits for years in advance, and will take big sound systems to other people's events and try to shut down their events to show that they're king of the protest cage, and there's a lot of stupid sectarian bullying. I remember at one point I said that communist groups one-upping each other. Imagine a group of homeless people, right? And there's like three guys and they only have $1. There's one guy and he's got $10, and he walks by the other guys. He's like, "You poor guys, I've got 10 times what you have." That's kind of like the communist groups ragging on each other, because none of them have any influence. But they're all desperate to prove that they're so much better than the other ones. But at the end of the day, they all have very little influence. But none of them are willing to reconsider their tactics, right? There needs to be a switcheroo. They need to change the way they operate in order to get to the masses. And if they don't do that, they're not going to have any influence. And especially in a lot of these older groups that have been around for decades, they're not going to do that. They're not going to have that conversation. So that's my thought on that. All right, organize. What does it mean? Well, it means, when you say organize, right? I mean, the main thing is that there needs to be an ideological shift. For years, I was of the mindset, we got to get in the streets. We got to do something. We got to get in motion. We got to get people active and go into protests and stuff. And I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong, right? Because right now, there's all kinds of people protesting. I mean, people are out on the streets of Philadelphia right now, once again, in response to another police killing. There's been so many protests are going on, and we're not getting any closer to socialism because there is a huge ideological problem. Right now, we need to build the Center for Political Innovation and start getting actual scientific Marxism, actual optimistic, positive socialism to the masses. We have to get a real type of socialism that would actually work in this country to the people. We need to develop socialism with American characteristics, and we need to have the conversations that the Center for Political Innovation is trying to innovate. That's what we need to do, and we need to get everyone involved in those conversations, because just being in the streets, the movementism, that was my mindset for years, was movementism, and it was a problem. Look, I'm so proud. There's a guy, Stuart Becker, right? He's a teacher in Texas, and he is going around his neighborhood and selling our edition of Gaddafi's Green Book. He's selling it around his neighborhood, and people are buying it and giving him feedback on it, right? He is getting the message about Libya. He's getting people to see Gaddafi's form of socialism. He's doing it, right? There's a guy in Louisiana, Jacob Maxey, who's distributing the book Getting Rich Without Capitalism on his college campus in Louisiana, right? He's getting the message out there. We need to confront people with an ideological socialism, not a synthetic left message, not a shut up, you racist piece of shit message, but a real ideological message. And, after this pandemic's over, we need to start having events around the country. I'm telling you, as soon as I can, I'm getting on a plane to California. I need to get to Los Angeles, and I need to get to San Francisco, because there are so many people tuning in right now that are in those areas. And we need to get out there and have a conference in California as soon as possible. We need to have the New York City conference we were never able to have because of this gosh darn pandemic. And I need to start coming to your universities, right? A lot of you are at colleges around the country, community colleges, state universities, small liberal arts schools. We need to get this message around, right? We need to get this new brand of socialism. We are offering a socialism that would actually work, right? I'm sorry, I've told people this story many times, but I will never forget when I went to Ecuador in 2013 to the World Festival of Youth and Students. And it was this huge moment for me because I met communists from South America, communists from Africa, communists from Asia. And it was a totally new experience because they were a totally different breed than American communists. They weren't hippies, okay? They weren't counterculture freaks, all right? They were serious people who wore business suits. They were not sellouts and reformists. Okay, Jimmy, do you want? but they were also not ultra-left insane. They were serious Marxist revolutionaries. And they would all say to me, what's wrong with American communists? Why are American communists so weird? And I didn't have any answer for them. When I met real communists, people like the MPLA of Angola, people like the communists of India, I'll come to your local, people like the Communist Party of India Marxist, right? I mean, people like the Vietnamese communists, the Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union. These are serious revolutionaries. They are professional scientific socialists who apply Marxism-Leninism. They reject left adventurism, they reject sectarian ultra-leftism, but they also reject, reformism and selling out. They have built real concrete organizations that represent millions of people, that have seats in the government. Those are real communists, and we don't have those in the United States. Instead, we have the synthetic left. We have counterculture, we have, pessimism, right? And that has to change, right? We need to build real scientific socialism, and that's what we're doing on here. Right? The way I'm talking on here, in the developing world, and even in a lot of European countries, this would be considered normal. People talk this way on the left. Not in the United States. In the United States, the left has been so corrupted and confused and infiltrated, and we are reviving actual scientific socialism, actual left-wing populism. That's what we're bringing back. All right, cool. It's a Wonderful Life. Well, it's a great movie. Classic movie, Jimmy Stewart, right? And the villain is an evil capitalist, right? He's an evil capitalist who's foreclosing on Jimmy Stewart and the community. He's done good things over the years. He's helped people. He's saying, I wish I had never been born. He's threatening to jump off a bridge. An angel visits him and shows him all the people he's saved over the years. And then at the last minute, they all come and bail him out, and they all sing Christmas together. And it's a movie about community. Right? It's a movie about community. It's a great movie, and there's no surprise. Ayn Rand told the House Un-American Activities Committee that it was communist propaganda. It wasn't communist propaganda. It was just kind of a feel-good movie. But it came out coming into the 50s, right? Jimmy Stewart, who'd been an actor in the 1930s, and Frank Capra and all of that. They still had that populist strand. The working class politics of the 1930s had not been completely eroded yet. And if you watch It's a Wonderful Life, you're getting some of the sentiments that Americans who lived through the Great Depression learned. Because during the Great Depression, my grandparents would talk about people took care of each other because they had no choice. They didn't take care of each other, they would die, right? And there was a lot more solidarity in those times because it was necessary. And now we're in desperate straits as a country. People are very hungry, people are unemployed, and we need solidarity once again. And we're going to have to learn to shed this petty bourgeois individualism and start caring for each other. All right. Now, what about the argument socialism never had a chance to work? Well, I don't think I think it did work. It just had a lot of problems. It's a fair argument, and I've said it many times, that socialism has always been under attack. Socialism has never been able to just freely develop. It's always been under attack and fighting for its life. And as a result, socialism everywhere that it's come into being has been corrupted by that. In a lot of cases, it's very authoritarian. But it has worked, right? It absolutely has worked. I'm sorry, but Russia and China became superpowers with socialism. Socialism, wiped out illiteracy in so many countries. Socialism industrialized so many countries. So if you just say, well, it never had a chance to work, in a way, you're almost conceding that would happen again, because any socialist society that exists is always going to be under attack, right? So that argument, in a way, it's a concession, because you're conceding that it didn't work, which is a lie, right? Socialism has, launched the first spacecraft into orbit, for goodness sakes. Socialism that invented the AK-47 rifle. Half the steel in the world is made by socialism. It worked, but it was corrupted by the constant attack it's under. The point is fair, but I don't know if I would frame it that way. All right, books on Trotskyism. Well, actually, I returned to source. I was in a group that confusedly thought they were Trotskyists for a long time, the Marcyites, and I read Trotsky. I read The Revolution Betrayed. I read In Defense of Marxism. I read The Permanent Revolution. I read The Transitional Program. I actually, for a while, I was reading Trotsky's, writings in exile, like Volume 1, 1931, 1932, 1933. Return to source. Trotsky himself is a good source, right? And I will say that a lot of the literature that's published to critique Trotskyism is not very good. In fact, actually, that's one of the few ways I think Trotsky looks good, is that some of the literature from the Communist Party and other groups attacking Trotsky is so over the top and ridiculous that it kind of helped Trotskyists, right? I mean, the Trotskyists during World War II were not Nazi spies. You know, that's ridiculous. They were wrong, right? They were opposing World War II. It was necessary, you know, for the USA to fight the Nazis, but they weren't Nazi spies. They were just ultra left. They were confused, right? And that a lot of anti-Trotsky pamphlets from the Communist Party are so over the top, they get to be a little bit ridiculous. And so I would encourage you to return to source, or I'd encourage you to read my book, City Builders and Vandals. There's some good stuff out there. You know, I got a lot from Moishe Olgin's pamphlet, Trotskyism, Counter-Revolution in Disguise. I learned a lot from that pamphlet. But, you know, and actually, I mean, you know, Stalin's critiques of Trotsky. There's a collection of Stalin's speeches against Trotsky. It's called Stalin on the Opposition. And if you read, you know, it's the text of like speeches Stalin gave, like on the floor of the Soviet, you know, gatherings. You know, I mean, speeches in response to Trotsky. And I've often read those speeches and found them quite insightful. I mean, nobody knew Trotsky better than Stalin did, right? And Stalin and Trotsky knew each other very, very well. So read what Stalin himself had to say about Trotsky. You know, he knew Trotsky quite well. But read Lenin also. Right? I mean, Lenin, up until, you have to remember, up until July of 1917, Lenin and Trotsky were not political allies. Trotsky joined the Bolsheviks at the last minute during the July days of 1917. But until then, Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution and his plans to build the August Bloc were something that Lenin thoroughly opposed. And Lenin wrote all kinds of pamphlets and articles criticizing Trotsky. You know, for a long time, Trotsky was advocating something called the United States of Europe. The United States of Europe. What does that sound like? The European Union. Well, Trotsky was advocating that they create a European Union, right? That all the capitalist powers of Western Europe merge into one European Union, one United States of Europe. And Lenin said, no, that would strengthen imperialism. Right? We want the imperialist powers to be divided from each other, right? And that would result in oppressing the workers of those countries more, right? And you know, there's a very good pamphlet called Imperialism and the Split in Socialism. And that's it's like a short pamphlet that was the basis for Lenin's later book called Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. And he starts out that pamphlet by ripping Trotsky a new one for his call for a United States of Europe. And he just rips him a new one and shows how that is a Menshevik or a social imperialist call. And that Trotsky, by going around agitating for a United States of Europe, was helping the imperialists and was part of the problem with the labor aristocracy and all of that. So yeah, I would check that out. Are we returning to feudalism? No, we're not. Feudalism is based on subsistence farming, and land owners, and serfs, and we are not returning to that system. We're not. We're entering a period of capitalism where there's little use for an industrial working class, right? They have vastly reduced the role of industrial workers in production. But no, I mean, we can never go back to feudalism because feudalism is based on subsistence farming, right? If you have industry, if you have factories, right? You have people selling their labor and getting a wage. That is not feudalism. So someone's asking why I won't be their Facebook friend. Okay, so my Facebook, they have a limit. You can only have 5,000 friends, and I'm always at that limit. And so then I have to wait because people shut down their accounts again. And then I have thousands of requests. I don't even think it's allowing me to get more requests, right? So it's not personal. It's not personal, whoever you are. It is definitely not personal. I would love to be friends with everyone watching on Facebook right now. It's just that Facebook has this 5,000 limit, and I've hit that limit years ago, and so it goes up to 5,000, and then somebody shuts down their account or unfriends me or whatever, and then I'm down to 4,900, 880 or something like that. So, if you want to message me or something, I can keep an eye out, and accept your request. But I'm just telling you, there's thousands of pending requests that I'm not able to answer. In fact, at one point they messaged me and they said they're going to stop allowing people to request to be my friend. So it's not personal. As far as Tibet is concerned, I mean, Tibet is part of China. It's always been part of China. The Tibetan people have greatly benefited from socialism. There were mistakes made, especially during the Cultural Revolution, in the way that religious people, including Buddhists, were treated. But right now, China is developing Tibet. It's built highways through there, poverty alleviation programs. They've been funding Tibetan Buddhism. So, yeah, I mean, it's not to say that mistakes weren't made, but Tibet has largely benefited from socialism. There's a great book called When the Serfs Stood Up in Tibet. Very good. Or read what W.E.B. Du Bois said about Tibet. W.E.B. Du Bois, the black intellectual, he went to Tibet and saw the achievements of the Communist Party, where they were freeing the people from serfdom. And that a lot of these atrocities that we hear about committed against Tibetan monks and stuff were actually committed by other Tibetans. The Tibetans were the people that suffered under Tibetan feudalism, right? And they rose up. A lot of those Buddhist monasteries were not destroyed by Han Chinese. They were destroyed by Tibetans who thought that those were, the symbols of old feudalism. In fact, there's one of the big Mao songs of the Cultural Revolution, Golden Mountain in Beijing, is actually a Tibetan melody that was adopted. So one of the main Communist Party songs, Golden Mountain in Beijing, is actually taken from a traditional Tibetan melody. There was the Tibet Civil War of the 1950s, where the United States airdropped people into Tibet and waged a civil war. Hundreds of thousands of people died. The Dalai Lama, it was slavery, it was feudalism, it was repression. And Hollywood has decided, oh no, it was a glorious, peaceful Shangri-La, and the evil communists wrecked it. And I think they're wrong. What do I think about reparations? I think that there should be reparations to individual communities. I think that the big banks on Wall Street and the big corporations that benefited from slavery, they have a special obligation to the black community. But I think that opens the door for other reparations too. I think the companies that profited from the Vietnam War should have to pay reparations to the Vietnamese people, as well as to the families of Americans who died in that ugly, unnecessary war. Right? I mean, the problem with reparations, and here's the thing, is that the way the debate is framed in the United States, it's framed in a way that, you get the impression that what advocates of reparations want is that the government sends a check to every person who is descended from slaves, and they get a check, right? And it comes out of the taxpayer's budget. And so then you get very angry, defensive white people who say things like, well, my family immigrated after slavery, or my ancestors didn't own slaves. How dare you? And it turns into this, this anger, this resentment, and that's not what reparations ever meant, okay? Reparations always, if you read what the organizations that call for reparations for slavery want, they want the huge financial institutions in the United States that built themselves up on slavery, like J.P. Morgan, right? Like Wall Street. Why was it called Wall Street? Because there was a big slave market there and a big wall, so the slaves couldn't get away. The foundations of American capitalism are built on slavery, and so they should have a special obligation to the black community. I don't think necessarily that should come in the form of every black person getting a check in the mail, but there should be, the funding of special programs. There should be big efforts to rebuild those communities. Yes, I am in favor of reparations, but I think we need to talk about what it actually means. And that's a pet peeve of mine, is if people don't know what it means, you will get a lot of people, both black and white, who will be very hostile to the notion of reparations if you just say reparations. But if you explain what it actually means, it's pretty simple, right? Have the big Wall Street banks that benefited from slavery. Slavery was a crime that killed millions of people and worked millions of people to death and exploited people 300 years of free labor. Shouldn't they have an obligation to the communities that still suffer as a result of that? Of course. It's not that outrageous, and the same should go for the other people that have suffered, right? Why the mining companies ought to pay reparations to the people of Appalachia for all the lives destroyed by black lung and their strike breaking with gun thugs. Reparations shouldn't simply be only about the issue of slavery. It opens the door to all kinds of capitalist institutions should be paying reparations to all kinds of working people who've suffered. And that, yes, through supporting the black community and their call for reparations, we can call for other working class people to get reparations for the crimes of the system. So we need to understand it that way and not fall into the trap, the trap of thinking it's like that Dave Chappelle sketch. Alrighty. I haven't read Whitney Webb's Dark Winter series, so I can't comment on it. Supreme Court, yeah. It's the neocons. I mean, that's who it is, right? I mean, talking about the Supreme Court of the United States, Amy Coney Barrett just got confirmed. And yeah, these are neocons. I mean, she's an evangelical. She's part of this People of Praise community. She's, out of Indiana. A lot of them were served under Bush, and Trump wants you to think he's different than Bush, but look at his Supreme Court nominees. Yeah, and here's federal court nominees. I think you're absolutely right about that. All righty. Does it matter where you go to college? Of course it matters, right? I mean, especially because you're going to go there, right? I mean, where you go to college, you're going to spend a lot of time there. You ought to think about where it is, is it going to help you in your career goal? Is it a place you want to study? Is it an atmosphere that you want? Does it have the classes and the subjects you want to take? Are you going to come out of it qualified? I'll honestly tell you, I'm not happy about where I went to college. I really shouldn't have gone there. I went there for personal reasons that are very frustrating to me. If I could do it again, I would have not ever gone to that place. It was a complete waste of my time. I tell people I learned a lot in college, but not in the classroom. I'll tell you that. I did learn a lot in college. I studied a lot in college. I did political activism in college, and I grew a lot as a person in college. But I don't have a high opinion of the school I went to. I really don't. And I wouldn't encourage other people to do it. If I could do it again, I would go to college not with the mindset I'm going there to learn, but rather that I'm going there in order to get a skill. I feel like, I'm not, I look back, I studied political science, looking back on it, a political science degree is not the most useful. I mean, if I had wanted to go to law school, maybe it would have been useful, but, my whole family, it's so sad, but I always got this speech about, oh, you're going to love college, Caleb. Everyone in college is like you. They're all nerdy and intellectual. Well, not at the college I went to, they weren't. And honestly, academia in the United States, that's a whole nother can of worms we can talk about sometime. I wasn't happy where I went to college. I was miserable. I made some good friends there in college, but it wasn't the best use of my time, honestly. And it has nothing to do with what I do now for a living, right? Maybe political science a little bit. But again, most of what I learned in college, I learned on my own. So, I don't want to say too much more about it. All right. Is the Bush crime family left or right? I would say that they are center right, the Bush family, right? I would say that there is a far right that is further to the right than them, than the John Birch Society. In a lot of ways, Reagan was actually further to the right than Bush, right? But they're to the right of most of the CIA, I would say. George Herbert Walker Bush was CIA director. They were in with Mike Pompeo and Gina Haspel. They advocate torture, right? Enhanced interrogation techniques and all of that. And I would say that the Bush family, they are to the right of most of the CIA. I would say that the ideological right, like the paleo-conservatives, the libertarians, they're further to the right. They're further to the right. Law school. They're further to the right. They're further to the right than the Bush family. The Bush family are like neocons. They're center right. There's a particular faction in the CIA that they're close to. Gina Haspel, Mike Pompeo, All righty. All right, racism and environmentalism. Well, I think the person was asking, is there racism expressed by environmentalists? There are people that are environmentalists that advocate eugenics. There are people that are environmentalists that believe in racial pseudoscience. There is a bizarre trend of eco-fascists, they call them, of people that are like neo-Nazis, but also environmentalists. And honestly, a lot of environmentalism, I feel like it's not necessarily racist. It's just there's an anti-human edge to it, right? They see humans as a cancer, humans as a problem. They're people that like to go hiking and fishing because they want to get away from people because people are annoying. And there's kind of an anti-human edge to some of it, but not all of it. I think environmentalism overall, we need to use resources in a rational, sustainable way. I mean, we do. I mean, they're not wrong, right? I mean, climate change is a reality. I mean, we're not using resources rationally. We're causing all kinds of problems. They're not wrong. I don't want to fight anyone. I don't engage in violence, so don't ask questions like that. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, when you say environmentalism, right? Like in a weird way, everyone's an environmentalist now. Trump thinks he's an environmentalist. So, I mean, what is an environmentalist? I mean, are there people that are racist and environmentalists? Sure. I think, Malthusianism, which is very big among environmentalists, can certainly have a racial edge to it sometimes, but not all environmentalists are like that. And, I mean, the basic message of environmentalists that we need to use our resources in a sustainable way is correct. So it's complicated. What is the best way to talk to the petty bourgeois about capitalism? Well, show them that in a socialist society, the petty bourgeoisie would be able to flourish, right? As part of a state centrally planned economy, they would be able to flourish, right? And that the idea that we're going to seize all their property is incorrect, right? Show them Nicaragua, show them China, show them Vietnam, show them the countries where a petty bourgeoisie is utilized for the building of socialism, right? I think a lot of petty bourgeois are convinced that under communism, all their property is going to be seized, and there will be no private business ever again, and they'll all be lined up and killed and have to work at a government state-run industry. Well, no, I mean, modern 21st century socialism uses the petty bourgeoisie and the small business owner as an ally. There's actually a very interesting pamphlet that was published for the 1932 presidential campaign of the Communist Party USA. And it was by a group of like small business owners, and it was like professionals for Foster and Ford, because it was William Z. Foster and James Ford were the Communist Party candidates that year. And there was a pamphlet, Professionals for Foster and Ford, and read it. It's an interesting manifesto of like middle-class people and the middle class supporting the Communist Party. I'd check it out if I was you. What were you like in high school? Well, I had red hair. I didn't have a beard. No facial hair in high school. And someday I will write an autobiography, and I will go into that in more detail. But I don't really feel like talking about that tonight. So, that's all I can say. I talk about that kind of thing with people that I know, right? I might talk about my history and things like that, but I don't talk about that on these lives. You don't talk about, I don't know. I mean, I ran cross country in junior high. I played soccer my freshman year of high school. Hated it. I'm just not an athletic kind of person. I was in the marching band. I played the trombone. Maybe someday, years from now, I'll write an autobiography or something, and I'll tell you about my high school experience. But other than that, I don't really want to talk about it. I was bored in high school. How about that? I was very bored. Very, very bored, in addition to many other things. All right, next question. Private armies. Yeah, that's an increasing trend, right? Military contractors. Betsy DeVos, who was the U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, she was actually, her brother is Eric Prince of Blackwater. I think that's particularly interesting. But yeah, it's an increasing trend of private armies. And then in D.C. during the protests, the recent Black Lives Matter protests, it's been interesting. They've been using these kind of private military guys against the protesters. And so then the question becomes, can they arrest you if they're not really the police, but they're like contracted by the police? Can they arrest you? Right? It starts to get interesting. I mean, it really blurs the line of what's next? Are we just going to have corporate government, right? Corporate cops? We've already got corporate cops, corporate army. Why not just corporate elected officials? I mean, why not? Why not? I mean, we're already doing that. I mean, they're appointing conservatorships, they call them, right? Or emergency managers to implement austerity in cities like Detroit and elsewhere. So, we're already moving in the direction of just having private elected officials, right? These governments that they set up, these troikas, or these emergency managers who destroy cities, or destroy countries even. Should patent laws be loosened? I don't know enough about that. I really don't know. Intellectual property stuff I'm not good with. I would recommend you talk to an attorney or somebody like that. I really don't know enough about patent laws. I already spoke about Tibet. Is Grover Furr credible? Well, I can't speak for a lot of his stuff because I just don't know enough about it. I mean, when he writes in depth about Sergei Kirov's assassination and stuff, I don't know enough about it. The book by Grover that I enjoyed the most was his book Blood Lies, which was his book refuting Dr. Timothy Snyder's book Bloodlands, and showing that Dr. Timothy Snyder was very dishonest in how he presented the facts in that book. So my recommendation, the best Grover book in my opinion, is Blood Lies, which is his refutation of the work of Dr. Timothy Snyder. He shows that Timothy Snyder blatantly misrepresents a lot of things. It's great work. That's a great book. State banks with 0% interest. Well, I would think that, that you would want a state bank to have some interest, right? Maybe if you really want to stimulate something, have, 0% interest. But, I would think that you want the state bank to have some interest. So it's like collecting taxes. It's like revenue, right? You don't want the state bank to go broke, right? And value depreciates. So the money, when it gets paid back, is going to be worth less, right? Money depreciates in value over time. So when they pay back the money, it's going to be worth less. So you're going to at least want to have some interest with the inflation rate. Okay. Revisionism. Revisionism. Well, I've done whole videos about the word revisionism and how it was invented by Edward Bernstein. It was originally meant to be a good thing. He thought it was a good thing. That there was revisionism, but then, then it became a pejorative with Lenin, and then later with China and Mao, it became a pejorative, but originally it was considered to be a good thing. So there you go. All right. Is neo-feudalism better than capitalism? No, because, well, first of all, there's no such thing as neo-feudalism. You can't have feudalism. Feudalism is based on a specific mode of production, right? And that mode of production is, subsistence farming, with one single landowner and serfs and peasants, working the land for them. So, yeah, you can't have neo-feudalism, right? It just doesn't work. With modern technology, the way production is carried out, we couldn't all be farmers now and live on the land of some aristocrat. That wouldn't work, right? I think people think feudalism means kings, right? People think feudalism means the monarchy. People think feudalism means having aristocrats and peasants or something, but the actual economic system of feudalism could never really exist. There might be remnants of it in various parts of the developing world, right, where you have landowners and serfs and stuff, but it's not feasible in modern times. So there you go. All right. U.S. government debt in socialism. Well, I would think one of the things that should be done, it should be canceled, right? And I've said that before, right? And that's the thing, is that, the government, right? And there's a lot written about this, but banks just completely rip off the government, right? You remember when, Obama, there was the debt ceiling crisis, and Obama, couldn't pay back the banks, and so then the USA's credit rating went up? Well, here's the thing. It's the government. They should tell the banks, well, no, our credit rating is this. Period. Right? It's like, I'm sorry, but it's like the government is not really obligated to pay back the banks. Right? The government, under the U.S. Constitution, under eminent domain, could seize all the property of the banks. Right? Banks shouldn't even be printing our money. Right? So it's like the U.S. government, the way the U.S. government is in debt to banks, is beholden to banks. It's, in fact, when we pay our taxes, that money doesn't go to pay for stuff. It goes to pay back banks who we borrowed from to pay for stuff ahead of time. It's all a big ripoff. The way the government and the banks operate is absolutely ridiculous. And I would think getting rid of that situation would be something that a socialist government would do. They would just come in and they would just say, you know what? Hey, banks, we've bailed you out so many times. You have so much wealth and power. You've broken the law. Your payments stop here. Right? I would think we would need a government to fight the banks because, the banks are constantly, when they always say we don't have the money for this, let's stop the bank payments. Tell the banks, you know what, you're going to have to wait to get paid, right? We don't have enough money to keep the electricity on in our city. So rather than turning off the electricity, we're just going to stop paying back the banks. You're going to have to wait for your money. Right? Detroit, great example. They're shutting off people's water all over the city. Well, why didn't they just tell the banks, you know what, it's a long-standing pattern with this, right? That banks, bank payments, paying back the banks gets this big priority. And it's ridiculous. All right. Policing in a socialist society. Well, look, I think that, I don't like the slogan, abolish the police, because it doesn't make any sense to people, right? When people say abolish the police, what they mean, and I agree with what they mean, is they mean that in the course of a revolution and transitioning towards socialism, we should build new institutions that serve people in different ways. The police very much serve to uphold and protect the capitalist system. You know, all right, gov programs. Rust Belt, all right. And, and that we need to create new police that operate in a new way, that operate differently to serve the people and to not uphold and protect problematic social relations. Well, that's correct. And I think the process of building socialism will mean changing how the military and how the police work, and restructuring them and building new institutions to serve a new mode of production and a new economic and political system. But if you just say abolish the police, people say, okay, so someone's breaking into my home. What do I do? Who do I call? Right? Or, that you can't say abolish the police or you just sound nuts. It's kind of like open borders. You can't just say open borders. You sound nuts. You need to explain this, right? And that saying, abolish the police is not a good slogan. But yes, we're going to develop new institutions. I would hope that socialist police forces would be based on de-escalation of situations. I hope that they would be more sensitive. They wouldn't see themselves as standing above the people, but rather be embedded with the people, be accountable to community assemblies. You would need the police to be from the communities they serve. You would need the police to be more sensitive in how they deal with things. You need them to be less focused on property and protecting the property, but rather focused on enforcing the will of the revolution. So yeah, policing agencies would need to change. I love Jimmy Dore. I absolutely love Jimmy Dore. When he went on Tucker Carlson and what he said on Tucker Carlson recently to Trump, amazing. I am a huge Jimmy Dore fan. Awesome. I am a huge fan of Jimmy Dore. He gets an A+ rating from me. I love Jimmy Dore. Absolutely love Jimmy Dore. All right. Law school. Hey, the class struggle happens in courtrooms. Lawyers are very, very important. If you want to go to law school and you think you can do it and you think you can get that law degree and fight for the working class as a lawyer, more power to you. More power to you if you can do that. That's a very, very noble thing to do. I applaud you for doing that. Yeah. All right, and someone said, well, what kind of government program would appeal in Rust Belt states, the Midwest and such? Well, I have said, many times that we need a vast program of reconstruction of the country. And that would include repaving the roads, building high-speed railway, and I think that would very much appeal to people throughout the country who are having the roads in their neighborhood crumble and seeing the infrastructure falling apart, the power plants falling apart, the water treatment facilities. Yes, that a vast program of reconstruction would be very popular in the states that have been economically left behind by American capitalism. I absolutely think that would be very important. Are there any more super chat questions this evening before we conclude our broadcast? Anything further? Anything further before we conclude? Speak now or forever hold your peace, or actually just wait until next time. I love Jimmy Dore. Great stuff. All righty. All righty. Anything else, folks? The clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. Anything else? I'm not sure when I will do my next live. Hopefully soon. Hopefully soon. I want to try to do as many as I can these days. Are you worried that Chinese billionaires will hijack the government? Not at all, because Chinese billionaires live in fear of the Communist Party. China is one of the only countries in the world that has ever executed billionaires. The Chinese Communist Party is far, far more powerful than Chinese billionaires are. And most of the Chinese billionaires only got their wealth because the Chinese Communist Party arranged it. Right? The Chinese Communist Party set up a relationship with them and enabled them to be in a position where they could get their wealth. And they know that, right? That they wouldn't have been able to, bring in the foreign investment and set up the businesses the way they did if the Communist Party hadn't, had their back a little bit. And so based on that, they're very loyal to it. And the Communist Party is far bigger and far more powerful than any Chinese billionaire. So I have no fear the billionaires are going to take over the party. I think it's the opposite, right? I think it's very, very much the opposite. So, yeah, I mean, the billionaires, and, I mean, in Iran, they did execute a billionaire as well. Those are the only two countries that I know of that has ever executed a billionaire is Russia, or is China and Iran. Russia doesn't have the death penalty right now. So, there you go. But, all right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up here. It's been fun. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. And on that note, folks,